Quiet on the set.
To vape or not to vape? That is the question. Why is it the question? Find out on Talking with Henrietta, coming up next. Hi, I'm Henrietta. Welcome to the show. You've probably heard of e-cigarettes, but do you really know what they are? According to the National Institute on Drug Abuse, electronic cigarettes, also known as e-cigarettes, e-vaporizer, or electronic nicotine delivery systems, are battery-operated devices that people use to inhale an aerosol, which typically contains flavorings and other chemicals. There are currently more than 460 different e-cigarette brands on the market, and their usage is on the rise. And what's disturbing for many is that their usage is on the rise among young people, with those 12 to 17 most at risk for using this new form of smoking. On this show, I'll talk with 4 guests who are very much involved with this issue. Greg Zaire, who is seated to my far left, is the Senior Advisor of the Alcohol and Other Drug Policy and Programs, also known as AOD. He leads the AOD program at a community collaborative called Redwood City 2020. Lisa Teeler, seated to my immediate left, is the Interim Executive Director of the Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council, which is focused on eliminating health disparities that exist across the generations and in diverse communities. Sharinda Bryant, seated on my immediate right, teaches freshman English at Menlo-Atherton High School. Sharinda is an advisor for the school's Black Student Union, and she leads the Tobacco Education and Policy Social Justice Project. Craig Wingate is a public health educator at the Tobacco Prevention Program in the San Mateo County Health. The program conducts community-based tobacco education programs and services for San Mateo County. Well, thank you so much for being here. It's an absolute delight to have the 4 of you with me. Now, we have heard about e-cigarettes helping people stop smoking. So what's the problem?
Well,
Or is there a problem?
well, that is a great question, and I think that in terms of e-cigarettes being viewed as a smoking cessation device, there are a lot of myths out there that it is actually that, but it hasn't. E-cigarettes haven't been submitted to the FDA for approval. Like you have your Nicorette gum, you have your patches, other FDA-approved smoking cessation devices to help people cut down or quit using tobacco. And e-cigarettes has not gone through the rigorous tests of being a smoking cessation device. So it is not that. And unfortunately, there's a lot of miscommunication and misinformation out in the public.
Well, do you know, it's interesting. I've heard people talking on radio stations who say that they were on e-cigarettes, they used them, and they actually helped them stop smoking. You haven't heard anything like that?
No, actually, we've been hearing the opposite, that this is introducing tobacco, particularly to our young people. I know personally, I visited my niece who was in college, and I had no idea about e-cigarettes or vaping or anything like that. And then when I visited her, I learned all this information about it, that the college students were using it. It was kind of like a cool thing, and it was being touted as something that you do to to not smoke.
Oh, interesting. Now, Lisa, you said vaping, and I said vaping at the top of the show. What exactly is vaping?
I'm going to let Craig answer that question.
So vaping is actual a verb that's been become popular. It describes what a person does when they use an e-cigarette. So essentially, similar to tobacco or smoking traditional cigarettes, people inhale the smoke. For vaping or vapes, instead of inhaling tobacco, cigarette, combustible smoke, they're inhaling aerosol from the vape pens. It's a myth that what's being released from the vaping device, which the myth is that it's a water vapor or a vapor, because how the e-juice is being managed by the device.
E-juice?
The electronic juice that's in the vape pens that contains nicotine and other chemicals, some that we know that are causing or can cause cancer. So how the e-juice is used and vaporized, essentially.
So is this something that's recognized that the e-juice causes cancer too?
The research that has been done on the e-juice has found at least 10 cancer-causing chemicals in those e-juices, and that's something that's not, you know, highly publicized, especially by the people who create the e-juices. Also, majority of the e-juices contain nicotine, even though they may say that they don't. We don't know all the other things that are in e-juices.
They don't say they contain nicotine?
There's ones that say that they don't contain nicotine tend to actually have traces of nicotine. And in terms of the level of nicotine that are in the e-juices, it varies. So there's no regulation around e-juices or e-devices, vape pens or e-cigarettes or any type of other devices.
Sure. Now, I said the four of you are involved in this issue. Sharinda, how are you involved?
Well, basically, I got involved through the county's health initiative. They were looking to raise awareness or have a group of young people to start this project and to raise the awareness on their respective campuses. And so I got involved as a coordinator for that cohort of students. And so through the Black Student Union, some of the students self-selected and wanted to be a part of this project because little did I know that they actually were very passionate about this issue because they have seen the effects. They've been seeing what's been going on, and this turned out to be the perfect way for them to speak out on it.
Ah, sure. And we have at least one of those students with us in the audience, along with another member who works with Sharinda, Shawnice, who's also worked with students. So how did the two of you become involved? And I haven't forgotten you, Greg.
I'm Shawnice Stevenson, and I'm the project manager. I work for BACHAC.
You have a microphone?
No.
And I work.
Well, I don't think you have a microphone right now. So we'll get you a microphone, and in the meantime, we'll go to you, Greg.
Yes. Your question.
So how did you become involved? And say more about AOD, alcohol and other drugs policies and programs.
Well, AOD is just that, alcohol and other drugs, and it focuses not only on tobacco, vaping, and so on. It focuses on marijuana, opioids, and all the things that have wreaked havoc in a number of communities. And so that is what initiated my interest. I am a social justice warrior, I suppose, someone who spent my entire career working on issues that in fact, impact our communities. That can be anything from drugs in our communities, crime, policing, housing, and so on. And so this fell really nicely into my wheelhouse.
So I had mentioned in introducing you that you're a part of a community collaborative called Redwood City 2020.
Yes, ma'am.
So tell us about that.
Well, Redwood City 2020 is a collaborative, and its interest is in bringing together a whole host of collaborative partners to deal on, to discuss, talk about, and resolve issues that no one partner can do on its own. And so that's the power of a collaborative organization. And Redwood City, as one of the partners within the collaborative, have taken up AOD as one of its core issues, along with success programs and so on.
So Lisa, the Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council,
What would you like to know?
how it became involved in this issue
Well,
and why?
Well, one of the things that we've always concerned, the organizations focus on health disparities. And when the word got out, we've partnered with the San Mateo County Health on a number of initiatives. And when we heard about this effort around reducing the use of tobacco among youth and the marketing to youth, which is very insidious, and also restricting the sales of tobacco, we felt that we definitely needed to be a part of this, part of the solution. And so that's why we partnered with the county and hired Shanice and others to address this issue, because it's really impacting our community, particularly our young people and our youth of color in the community. And we've seen the effects of that in our community, and as it may lead to other health issues, as we know.
Well, are any of you familiar with what the city of San Francisco has done when it comes to e-cigarettes? Because some cities are banning
Yes.
the sale of e-cigarettes. And Greg, how familiar are you with that particular action on the part of San Francisco?
Yes, well, San Francisco adopted an ordinance a few months ago banning the sale of flavored tobacco products, and but they still had e-cigarettes, like the actual devices, in stores. So they're now looking at implementing a policy that would restrict the sale of all e-cigarettes. Here in San Mateo County, the policymakers that we've worked with, and our focus has been on restricting the sale of flavored tobacco products. So currently the county and unincorporated areas of San Mateo County have a ordinance restricting the sale of flavored tobacco products. The cities of Half Moon Bay and San Carlos do as well, and as well as the town of Portola.
Now, is all of this because more and more young people have taken up using e-cigarettes?
Well, part of it is not only e-cigarettes. Part of it is there's a vaping culture that is pervasive that we haven't really touched on thus far, but we should really talk about that, because those are the things that welcome or inveigle, cajole individuals into participating in e-cigarettes. And we may talk about the over-the-counter stuff, but there's also the opportunity for young people to create their own liquids at home, which is a different kind of danger altogether. In conjunction with that, and the other thing that we may not want to talk about, but it should be put on the table, is that there are certain manufacturers now that are advertising about the health benefits, say B vitamins within e-cigarettes. So it's a pretty expansive industry, and it's taken hold, and in a lot of schools, young people are even vaping during class or behind the bleachers or in the bathrooms. And so that is, as I've heard the other guests talk about, a big concern for each one of our either agencies or institutions, because young people are at risk. Their health and livelihoods are at risk.
Sharinda, Greg just talked about the vaping culture, and before I let him say a little bit more about it, are you familiar with this whole idea of vaping culture?
I became more familiar through working in this project, and I learned a lot from the students. And so what Greg said is absolutely correct. As far as students vaping in classrooms, in the bathrooms, in Menlo-Atherton, there has been an increase of suspensions because of this, or because of having the paraphernalia on campus. And so, now we get into a little bit of a different issue when suspensions increase. But it is a trend, and this age group, 14 to 17, is very, they want to do what's popular. So without even hearing or knowing the effects, they want to do, what everyone else is doing.
Sure. Now, if it's vapor, how do you vape in a classroom? Wouldn't the vapor spread in the classroom and everybody knows that you were vaping?
Well, it's precisely because it is a vapor. It's not traditional smoke. So you can tuck it into your shirt and blow. And the odor is disguised. It smells like anything that they want it to smell like, meaning the manufacturers.
Like flavors?
Watermelon, cotton candy,
Well,
honey bun.
when you start smelling that, then wouldn't you know that somebody is vaping?
Well, not initially, right? It could be, teachers might suspect that it's a lotion, right? Or could suspect that they just came from a bakery.
Candy, gum.
Candy,
Right.
gum.
Right.
But now, as our awareness about what the impacts are and what the odors are is increasing, there are chances, as Sharinda talked about, with regard to suspension. And so we're stuck in this middle halfway house, so to speak, where there's a lot of research about the dangers. The awareness of faculty and administrators is not at its peak at this point. The saturation with regard to awareness is not necessarily out there. And so our response is traditionally suspend. That's our form of corporal punishment or discipline. And there needs to be some kind of understanding about why young people are taking part or partaking within the culture and the impact.
Well, I'm going to try and do something. We have a shortage of microphones, and I would like to have the two of you give your input. So I am wondering if you could come around and maybe stand behind Greg. We'll see if this works. And yes, and talk about students on campus. So if you could come around the back of the camera, and we'll just see if this can work with you talking loudly enough maybe to use Greg's microphone. So introduce yourself, and I'll be told if they can hear you. Yes.
My name is Anaya Majors. I am currently the Sequoia High School Black Student Union president. And when the advisor told us about this program, it boosted for me because, not everybody knows about it. And I see it every day. Like, you guys are talking about how the kids are in class. Like, some teachers don't notice. Some teachers are like, they know what's going on, but some teachers don't. Because not all of the vape pens have just nicotine. Some kids buy their jewel pods with marijuana, with the oils. So
Wow.
it varies of like which ones they're actually using. So in jewel pods, they have nicotine, but also they have it where it's mixed with not just nicotine, where it's mixed with marijuana.
No, you said Jewel Pods. The company is Jewel.
It's a brand.
Uh-huh.
And so
okay.
you guys are talking about like e-juices. They're mostly called like jewel pods. So they're little tiny little pods. Like some you can get them where like it's a container. Like it looks like eye drops. Where you take that and then you fill it into the little tiny pot, like the little tiny little container that it goes in that you stick into like your little jewel pod, and then you just in class.
So what do you think about all of that?
I personally myself do not use it because I don't think it's good, and I know that there are students that do it all the time, and I have friends that when I'm around, they don't do it because I know any type of drug can get you hooked on numerous of things, and my life, like, that's taken a lot out of my family. So I always promote, not smoking and just doing the right thing. But, some people don't want to hear that. They want to join the fun. And seeing all the young, like, kids younger than me do it, it's surprising.
And
'cause
how old are you?
I'm 17.
Uh-huh.
And I have a younger sister that's 14, that's turning 14, and a younger brother, and they see that, and it's popular, and they want to do it, and it kind of, it worries me because you see all the kids around, and they're doing it because it's fun, but they're not seeing the health risks in it.
What's fun about it? Just the actual, what, puffing or inhaling
It's
or
the-
the flavors? Or?
So it's a numerous of things, because some kids like it because they can get high, and some people like it because it makes them feel good. The flavors come in numerous, like there's people who do like raspberry, blueberry. There's like a numerous of things that promote e-cigarettes, and that's what like gets people hooked, because you don't know if it's an e-cig or not because they look like little USB cords that you can plug into your computer. People charge them on their computers.
Really?
Like they're USB, they're like this big. You can take one side, plug it in your computer, and then when it's charged, you can use the other side. Like they're just
When you say use the other side as a
smoke.
USB, but you don't have to charge them to smoke. It's just,
it depends
that-
on which one you're using.
that's part of the function as a
Wow.
USB.
Yeah, so how it works is if you get one that looks like a USB cord that you can like plug your, like, you plug your phone charger into. How it works is if you buy one like that, you take one side and you plug it into the computer to charge the battery on it, because the e-cigarettes, like a lot of them are electronic. So you just use it to charge the battery, and then you can take it off, cover the battery part of, and then use the other side to get smoke out of it.
Well, you mentioned the company Juul, and a representative from that company is testifying in front of Congress this week. And after his testimony, one of the congressional leaders said that he's just plain selling poison in no uncertain terms. Do you agree with that? It seems like it's really big business. Thank you for your input. We might call on you again. So I'm hoping that she was heard very clearly. So, is it poison?
Well, I believe it is. I mean, whenever you put any kind of chemical in your body and it has traces of nicotine, and as Craig just mentioned, 10 other chemicals that cause cancer, that is poison. And that can lead to other things. I mean, Sharinda just mentioned suspensions are going up in their school. So there's other implications that are impacting it.
Suspensions because the students are vaping.
Getting caught with
No.
either vaping or
Do
with
the
the device.
schools have some type of regulations that the vaping isn't allowed?
Right, it's under the kind of the general, no drug policy on campus. And so,
And these are considered drugs by the schools.
correct. So
It's also
now,
paraphernalia, so it's
Yes.
drugs and paraphernalia. The California Code for suspension is very clear about that. It's not just drugs, so we should be mindful. And so in many situations, school districts' hands are tied by the policies that they have to abide by.
So those suspensions, what do they look like? Suspended for how long?
depending on the infraction, could be 1 to 5 days. Usually not 5 days, 1 to 3 days. So then you're missing class, and I just feel the school has made a real targeted effort to crack down on this, and I know that it's probably been an issue for a while, but now they're like, we're really going to crack down. And they do have some awareness that they're trying to bring through posters and other things on the campus. But as Greg said, this is a culture thing. And so to shift the culture on the campus, we have to do a lot more than hang a sign.
That's interesting, to shift the culture on the campus. Is there more that can be said about the culture?
Certainly. Well, I just want to talk just a bit about suspensions, because we're working on policies now, and Sequoia Union High School District has really been proactive about thinking about ways to mitigate some of the detrimental effects to young people who are suspended. So we're thinking about in-school suspensions, programs that limit how many days a child spends away from school.
Now, I have a question.
Sure.
It's You know, it's very thoughtful to be concerned about the student who's been suspended, but that student is breaking the school regulations. That student knows that they shouldn't be vaping. Now, is this vaping on the campus itself or vaping in the classroom? I mean, if the student is vaping on the campus, is that worthy of being suspended?
My understanding is yes. I'm not sure how it works at.
So
Menlo-Atherton.
On
if
campus
students
anyway.
know that they're going to be suspended, why do they continue?
Well, we're talking about addiction. We're not just talking about
Yes.
an activity that they're partaking in. We're talking in a lot of instances addiction.
So
And
you're
we should not-
you're saying that these students are already addicted.
Potentially. I don't know which student we're talking about, but there is an addictive mechanism attached to vaping, and it's purposely so because of the manufacturers.
Sure.
Yeah.
It's supposed to, we started the program talking about how it's supposed to ease an individual off of traditional cigarettes, but that easing, there is a gap between abstinence and use that is not being filled adequately by.
Well, I have a
E-cigarettes.
question in terms of this. If they are marketed for adults to help them stop their smoking habits and they're already addicted, I mean, it's addicting using them. How is that going to stop somebody from smoking?
Can I just say that it's questionable whether it's marketed to adults? I don't know if Honey Bun is for
Well,
adults.
well,
And that's the
well,
point.
the
Yeah.
person, you know, representatives from Juul say we're doing everything we can. It's not marketed for young people. It's marketed for adults.
Well, I'm certain everyone around this table will probably disagree when you look at the colors and the flavors.
Yes.
It's not adult.
Strawberry, watermelon.
Yeah, it's
Yeah.
like what adult
Cotton
would
candy.
buy that? Yeah. It's
Don't adults like those flavors?
Not as much as children.
But to your point, Henrietta, I mean, I've seen the commercials on TV, and they've been more lately, where they're advertising it as to adults
Yes.
as a way to get off of smoking cigarettes. But that's just smoke and mirrors, for lack of a better word, because they are actively targeting young people.
And also, the research shows that people who make the switch, which is Juul's tagline, they tend to use both traditional cigarettes as well as e-cigarettes. So when they can't smoke traditional cigarettes, they'll switch to e-cigarettes. And when you look at the previous marketing, like when they first came out, you look how they were on social media and the different type of advertisements and the flavors, over 1,000 flavors, different types of flavors. They are like unicorn poop. What adult would use something called unicorn poop? So it was very targeted to youth.
Just to try it out.
I definitely would not want to try anything called unicorn poop.
And I'd just like to also say that we need to put this also into context when we think about what young people, particularly in that 12 to 17-year-old range, are doing. They're trying to become or express themselves independent of their parents. So a cigarette is an easy device to achieve that. So it may be marketed towards adults explicitly, but young people, teens particularly, and adolescents, see it as a gateway to so-called adulthood. That's the sociological part of it. That's not usually a part of the discussion at all.
And the biological, the danger of youth using these devices is that their brains are still developing. Their brains develop until they're early to the mid-20s. And their brains are just being transformed into being addicted to nicotine.
So tell me, is that any different from using cigarettes? I mean, if the vaping is harmful to the brain, wasn't cigarettes harmful too,
Yes.
to the same degree?
Yes.
And cigarette smoking has gone down.
Because of various policies that have been passed throughout the years, because of regulations that the FDA have put in place, we have seen and continue to see a decrease in cigarette smoke and usage. And that's a great thing. That's what we want to see. We want to see communities healthy and not addicted to any type of tobacco, especially cigarettes. But now that e-cigarettes are in the market, there's a whole new opportunity to get more people hooked. And research also shows that in terms of youth use, when they are using e-cigarettes, they're 4 times more likely to transition into combustible cigarettes.
Really?
Yes.
Why is it that e-cigarettes don't give the same level of nicotine, or?
That may be the case in terms of people wanting more of that nicotine. They'll transition into cigarettes to get that amount of nicotine kick.
No, I think, no, you were the one that said, either you or Greg said that under the culture, young people are making up their own.
Yes,
They can make up their own.
their own liquids, yes.
So if somebody can make up their own liquids, aren't they then in control of what type of liquids and the content of the liquids, or
No, because
to increase the dose of nicotine in some way?
it goes back to what I said earlier in terms of we don't really know what's in the e-juice. It could be marijuana, it could be some level of nicotine, it could be something significantly higher than what's traditionally in what's marketed as e-juice, as it's like given to the, when a person buys it, they could say it has like 4 milligrams and it actually has 14. So we don't really know because again, there's no regulation on these products and the e-device itself. So
Additionally, the ease of use with an e-cigarette or electronic or pod, right? It doesn't just have to be a Juul or an electronic cigarette. They have these pods now, and it's that young people are making their juices. And so the ease of use with regard to being able to just readily take a hit and then, or not light up a cigarette, but take a hit, often encourages them to take multiple hits more than they would with one cigarette.
Are there any health problems that have shown up yet with young people that you know of?
the research shows that there have been some health issues that have come up. Research is still new, and more research needs to be done. And that's the point. Why have these products out in the community, allowing people to use them when they haven't undergone heavy research studies, FDA approval? That's why should the community and the population as a whole be guinea pigs for Juul and other tobacco industry companies?
So can a company just put anything on the market like that for public consumption without having it tested and FDA approval?
Well, Juul
I
has.
mean,
Yes.
can I just create a liquid and sell it, and if I can sell it, and
Well, that's where we are now in
Right.
terms of Juul and other e-cigarettes and e-juice companies. Essentially, they put a product out in the community and people are buying it because of their fake marketing.
well, I must say one of Juul's major contributors, supporters, happens to be a tobacco company. So we do
Altria.
know what the interest is. Shawnice, I don't want to leave you out, and I don't know if you want to come up
here.
and use Greg's microphone and say something, and you can walk behind the camera if you would like, behind the camera, and we'll see how this goes.
Yeah.
Now, you work with students. You've worked with students.
So I was the project manager. So I worked.
is the project
yeah,
manager.
I am the
For the
project
project
manager.
that's been taking place at
Yes.
Menlo-Atherton?
Yes, at BACHAC. So what we were is that we worked with the BSUs at Sequoia Union
The Black
High
Student Unions.
at Sequoia High School and Menlo-Atherton. So I work directly with the advisors. And we also work with a middle school that was in Pacifica, and I work with their advisor there, and they came up with a social media campaign to really talk to their peers about the dangers of flavored tobacco.
The students did.
The students did.
And so, how did that work out? I assume it's over now.
It's over now. I think the project was great. I think what the greatest part about it was that the 20 youth that we were working with ended up, I think they learned something new. And so they were able to like stand up in class. Like one student talked about that. A middle school student talked about like, hey, is that what's happening to my cousin or my brother, like, because they're doing it too. Like, they didn't know, like, the impacts on the brain. They didn't understand the impacts on the body. And we did training with them so that they're not saying what we want them to say, but they're having an experiential process where they come up with their own words and their why. And they did videos, they did all kinds of things, but they also were just very creative, writing poetry, and they wanted to tell others. And one of our students really talked about the teasing piece because they were part of the project, but they said because they learned more, they did things differently, and the things that they were already seeing in the schools and in their community, they now were aware and able to talk about it more.
Now, when you talk about the teasing piece, what are you talking about?
It's not popular.
To speak
It's
out
not
this time,
popular to stand up against something that's part of the culture. You really have to have a lot of courage as young adults, young people. I know that there's sometimes guilt there because maybe they have tried it and didn't like it, but there's shame there. And so there were people who could have been a part of our project. We didn't assess whether or not they used it, but we were like, hey, you know, you're just as valuable as a person who never did it or had a health condition or whatever the case may be, because that could be kind of like your testimony or your truth that you can share out as we give this message.
Sure, stand there for a moment and
Yes,
let me
ma'am.
just say, how long has e-cigarettes been in the public arena, so to speak?
Oh, that's a good question. We're in 2019. They've been around for a while. They started out as a traditional, they looked like traditional cigarettes. It was like a electronic cigarette that looked like a cigarette. And you didn't really see that much. You saw advertisements for them in magazines, but they didn't they didn't catch fire until Juul came out with their device. And that's when you started seeing more youth using it.
And about when was that?
That was probably about 2 or 3 years ago.
Okay, so talking about youth culture or the culture, how did something that came out or started becoming popular 2 or 3 years ago reach such a peak, so to speak?
I think much of it is attached to the things that I talked about just a second ago with regard to identity. It's a status symbol in a lot of cultures, right? I mean, it's as symbolic as a gold watch or something like that, where young people are, because of peer pressure, encouraged to participate or fall outside of that culture, or be ostracized or be thought of as, goodness, I'm going to use this term, but not cool.
Sure. So, Shawnice, I don't want you just to stay there. If you want to sit down.
Yes, thank you.
And you know, the other thing I do want to say
But I'd like to invite you up too if you'd like to be a part of the discussion.
is the fact that we're also, and I think I'm just so proud of this, is seeing young people actually speak up and speak in front of city councils and mayors and their peers. So this is the other benefit of this project, is not only the health issues and having the young people speak to other young people about the dangers of this, but we're also creating an environment where we're developing the leaders among our young people, and they're feeling comfortable about speaking up, you know, speaking in front of people. We know that's pretty
action,
scary,
yeah.
and taking action and taking that pressure, you know, being teased and being able to utilize the tools that they can to say, you know, that's I'm okay, and I'm trying to tell you something that's important
Since
about your
we
health.
don't have you identified on screen, give your name again.
My name is Anaya Majors.
Anaya.
Anaya.
So, Anaya, were you teased?
No.
And the way you said it wouldn't have made a difference anyway.
Confidence, that's true.
Because my friends, like, I'm gonna tell them like it is. Like, I don't agree with smoking. Myself, I used to smoke a lot. Like,
Oh, did you?
I was around when they had the little vape pens that look like cigarettes. I was in the 5th grade doing it.
In the
And,
fifth grade.
and me and my friend,
And let's see, how old would you have been in the 5th grade?
That's 11, 12.
I was 11.
11.
Wow.
So this is a little story. Me and my
And how
friend.
did you get them?
I'm gonna tell you. Me and my friend, we went to the store, and the guy was like, "We can't sell it to you." So we gave another guy the money that was older than us to buy it, and he went to go buy it and brought it out the store for us.
Wow.
And then we just walked on our merry way. But after a while, I just didn't like it. So
Why?
it just wasn't. It wasn't fitting to me anymore. Like I didn't see it as something that I wanted to keep doing. So once I got into like 6th grade, it just didn't seem appealing to me anymore. Like I
Which
had my
means
fun.
you didn't get addicted.
No.
And what about your friend?
She still smokes and does the
No.
things that she do. Yes.
And
But-
you're 17, and she would be about 17 too.
Yes.
And so she smoked that long.
Yes, but she doesn't use nicotine anymore.
So she's smoking something else?
Yes.
Oh.
See, the thing that a lot of people, it varies the person, I might say. Like, I myself, nicotine, it's not appealing to me. So once I moved on from it, I didn't look back. For some people, they could smoke cigarettes, and that's all they think about. But then they move on to the nicotine patch, and then it changes, and then they don't want to smoke anymore, and they use different ways to feed into, you guys are saying, the sensation. A lot of people just use nicotine once or twice and then don't see an addiction by it and don't use it. Like they say, it takes 20, 21 days to create a bad habit or to create a habit in general. That's just how it felt for me. Like, I used nicotine for more than 21 days when I was in the 5th grade. But after I seen that I didn't like it, I stopped using it.
Now, did your parents know?
I told my mom when I got to like high school.
So where did you smoke? Or use it?
The park. Because, no one notices what you're doing at the park. It just goes in the air and it's gone.
Mm.
But you guys are talking about, like, the students in classrooms. Like, I've seen it. It's everywhere. Like, the thing that a lot of students do in class is they'll smoke and they'll hold it in. And that causes, like, a whole lot of problems in the body because you're not supposed to keep the air in because it's really bad. Like, you get really sick and things can get stuck and your body doesn't function right. Some people, they blow it into their shirt and teachers don't notice it. Some teachers know. Some teachers don't. But nowadays, e-cigarettes, they're mainly used for getting high. People use them now to get high. Like, they have it mixed with marijuana. So the marijuana oil they're using in their e-cigarette is how they're walking around class like this because they're getting high off of what they're smoking.
Wow.
But teachers don't know that because you can't smell it.
So what do you think, before I ask the others sitting here with me, what do you think should be done?
I think it takes one day at a time, and it's a process. Me speaking to people about it, they're just like, I don't want to hear it. Like them getting in trouble, they're still gonna be like, okay, well, I'm just gonna go home and do it anyway. It's more just about how they need to see the health risks on their own. Because, your parents are going to tell you, like, you're going to keep getting in trouble if you keep doing the same thing. They have to learn when they're going to want to have to stop. They're going to have to see something really bad happen.
But it might be too late. I mean, they might be addicted by that time.
And then that's when, that rock bottom hits in and you figure it out. Because I know people who have to hit rock bottom before they even want to stop smoking or doing any type of drug.
Well, I don't know about rock bottom, but I know the writer Mark Twain said it's easy to stop smoking. He's done it many times. So, rock bottom, how would you describe rock bottom?
Well, it depends on everybody because, some people, they just see, like, I have a friend where, she smokes marijuana and nicotine, but after a while, I started to tell her, like, because there was health risks involved. And I told her, I was like, if you ease off of the nic and stop using it as much, then you'll start to see that you don't need it all the time because nicotine, you're going to have that in your brain like, oh, I'm not doing nothing, so I'm going to use nicotine. I'm going to smoke some nicotine. Like, it's all about the person and how they use it. Because not a lot of people, they use nicotine and don't get addicted. Some people use it every day and get addicted. Like, it depends on like who that, like how they want to stop. Because you can't tell somebody what to do just because like
Right.
they're not gonna change. Like if I keep telling someone, yeah, stop smoking every day, it's not gonna matter. Because they're gonna hear from me every day and still not change. That's just me nagging in their ear.
Thank you so much.
You're
I appreciate your input.
And I'm learning something. I learned something today about the marijuana oil. See, that's what I'm saying. It's like it just keeps going on and on. You know, first it's the nicotine, and now we're talking about marijuana. So it just keeps expanding, which is a scary thought.
Well,
Emphasizing, right?
Yes.
you talked about our future leaders, and Anais seems to really be one who's willing to speak up.
Very
So
proud.
you can sit if you'd like, or you can stay.
Thank you. I'll go have a seat.
Thank you.
Now, I had asked her what can be done. So, what can be done? There's cities like San Francisco that's banning it. And we'll see what our congressional representatives do with the testimony that they've been hearing, where one response was it's just absolutely poison, and it seems unethical. But then selling cigarettes and getting people addicted seems unethical and immoral. So we're back. What can be done?
Well, policymakers like in Patola Valley and San Carlos, Half Moon Bay, and the county of San Mateo, they can do something to protect their constituents. They can put restrictions on the sale of flavored tobacco. So that's definitely
In their areas.
in their areas, yes, and they can reduce the access to these products, which would potentially reduce usage because people wouldn't be able to buy it anymore.
Well, one response is that if a city puts restrictions and bans the sale, people will just go outside of the city limits to wherever it is. They can still buy it and buy it.
Yes, it's like water; it finds a way, doesn't it? And so the policy approach about putting limitations or ordinances on e-cigarettes, while productive in a great many ways, it doesn't address the core issue. And some of those core issues involve not e-cigarettes or not any kind of drug per se, but the lack of opportunity for youth development. And so those are some of the critical issues that need to be a part of the conversation.
So how do you tie a lack of youth development in with the use of e-cigarettes? Because it's like using cigarettes. Were cigarettes used by young people because of a lack of opportunities?
However, the tobacco industry specifically targeted people of color with menthol flavored cigarettes. I mean, we've seen the data and we've seen the actual memos from those companies back in the 50s and 60s. So this is also a social justice issue that they are specifically targeting youth of color around this product. And so they're just repeating history again. They're doing exactly the same thing they did, 50, 60, 70 years ago. They're doing the same thing.
I can remember, too, the ads for Virginia Slims, like you've come a long way, baby. Yes, exactly. So women were targeted and...
Their flowery ads and
Right.
Yes,
the LGBT
exactly.
community was targeted. The tobacco industry hijacking certain symbols like the rainbow and putting it in their product, the advertisement for their product. So yes, the tobacco industry is very smart and very slippery, and it constantly evolves into something else. And currently, it's evolved into e-cigarettes and other vaping products. And yes, there is the policy angle, and there's also the community education and youth development, and tying all those things together. That's how we're going to combat against the tobacco industry. That's how we're going to save youth and young adults from these poisonous products.
So, Greg, you first mentioned youth development. What did you have in mind?
I think that we have divested a great deal from engaging youth in some activities within their neighborhoods. Our parks are prescriptive. There are few activities for which they can engage, youth employment, any host of development activities are further and far in between one another. And I think that there's an opportunity for us to look simultaneously at the e-cigarettes. And I want to say that it's, again, I don't think that it's just e-cigarettes because, as I said before, like water, osmotic, it'll find a way. I remember when I was in college, it was huffing. So it was throwing some aerosol in a bag and inhaling it. So I think that there's a lot of opportunities there, but there's not enough education. And I think, as Anaya has so wonderfully exemplified, that there are voices out there that can attach to this issue and start to kind of peel back the curtain for a lot of young people that we're not necessarily taking maximum advantage of.
And when you talk about a social justice issue, how can the idea of social justice be something that gets recognition?
Well, I think,
And I have to say, do you think people of color are more targeted in this particular respect than the general population?
well, historically we have been.
What about now in terms of e-cigarettes?
Oh, I definitely, and I'm sure you guys could speak to that. We see it. I mean, we see in communities where there's the neighborhood store, where there's a diverse community, the e-cigarettes are there. They're promptly, in the front of the store for sales. So it's
They're not behind the counter locked up like cigarettes. No.
Well, I'm so glad that Lisa brings that up because then we have to look at the saturation of community-based markets within poor Black
Yes.
communities. So because of that saturation, there's a higher exposure to advertisements, and that encourages smoking more than in other communities.
Other comments?
I was thinking about there's an interesting disparity that has come about in regards to young people using the devices that they purchase. And I've seen some of these devices, there's now a pressure to have a fancier device. Like these things range in price. They can get $200 or $300, so I've heard.
wow.
And so now you have that $300 device.
So you mean there is an
Status symbol.
industry that's
Yes.
been built up? You had talked about paraphernalia.
Right.
And it's just not the cigarettes. It's like, oh, okay, all of these other adjacent products that people can make money out of.
And there's been some parents that have come to their school wanting that device back
Because
because
of the
that's an
cost.
investment.
The parent wanting the device back?
Yes, they
Did it
come
belong
to
to
claim
the Did it belong to the
When they're
parent?
confiscated.
when they do. Yeah, they can. I don't know who purchased it, but the parents. That's a lot of money. I would like. I
And
don't
how
know
did
if
the student get the money in the first place?
right. We don't know.
Well, some of the ways that they get them is to order them via Amazon or some other
That's true.
online service, and they deliver them without question. So there are policies being entertained about prohibiting that without a signature or an ID at the door at the time of delivery.
Well, I'm just thinking of the money. If it's $200 to $300 and you're a student,
I think that there is this parallel between poor communities and affluent communities and who has them. So the cost of entry, whether it be $40 at the low end or $300 on the high, within that variety, there are levels of identity and image consciousness and affluence versus lack thereof.
Yes. Yes.
So in the remaining time that we have, I'd like to know more about what can be done and what can we anticipate in this area going forward.
I want to say that what I find encouraging about young people, many young people, it's always been young people at the forefront of movements, right, throughout history. And so students like Anaya and others that I've worked with, they encourage me, and I am so pleased that a social justice issue, something to stand on, they want to do that. And so I feel like, if we lock down and some of those young people that are willing to stand up and speak, we'll make a new trend. we'll start to shift that culture and to you know, anti-vaping. And so I'm encouraged. I want to say that, yeah, young people are standing up and they're leading the way.
It occurs to me, and you just reminded me, if you're going to change a habit, some say you have to replace it with something else.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm thinking this is a good time for replacing. Is there anything that can be given in place of that would be as attractive, as interesting, adopted as part of a new culture?
Well, I can't speak to the young folks, but again, what I'm seeing is the replacement is developing those leadership skills to make yourself marketable, to be able to public speak. I think those are the things, and to make it be cool. I mean, to be cool to, hey, be with the mayor and, that kind of thing. So you're right. I think you have to replace it with
Now,
something.
would those be opportunities for every student?
Good question.
I don't see why not. And I think all of us can create those opportunities, whether it's, speaking in front, whoever. It might be a TED Talk. It might be speaking at your school. It might be speaking at your church. It could be a variety of different things. This is stuff you can put on your application to get when you're, applying for colleges. Mm-hmm. I mean, I think when people start seeing that, hey, if they have put this down, and I know there's also the kind of biological, clinical, medical, and I think that's an area that we need to do more work in. Instead of the punitive suspension and all that, I think there's those folks that are addicted. We need to be helping them from a different perspective. But I think if we start, for lack of a word, marketing that you can be cool and let people see that, like I and other students. Hey, she's college bound. She's done this. She's done this. She's going places. She's going to have some paper in her pocket.
Right.
She can buy those Jordans or whatever. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
That whole social status thing.
Right.
People say you can have all those things without,
Well,
vaping.
there is a lot that needs to be done, and we will see how much can be done, and we will see if there can be other skills given in place of what we currently have now that's described as youth culture.
Mm-hmm. Right.
And so I'd like to thank you all, the four of you and the two of you, Shawnice and Anais, for being here. I have 30 seconds left. Who'd like to have the last word? In 30 seconds.
If you are a youth and you're interested in tobacco prevention, reach out to the Bay Area Community Health Advisory Council or the San Mateo Tobacco Prevention Program, or just write to your elected official.
Thank you. The 30 seconds are over, and I'd like to thank you again for being with me, and I'd like to thank our audience for watching. Until next time.